Hey, I'm at San Diego Comic-Con with the famous Matt Nelson, the man who brought pressing comic books into the forefront of the collecting hobby, the first superstar presser coming out of Texas, and then he melded his company into CGC itself. So let's talk about how you got started in pressing and actually improving comic books without getting a restoration label on them that has really just accelerated the whole velocity of comic books and comic book collecting and graded books in general, because that has been the #1 influence in comics and the appreciation of comics for the past 20 years.
Yes. Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to get into restoration in the 90s with Bill Cyril, who was the first professional restorer in the hobby. So I learned a lot of techniques from that.
Okay.
And then when CGC opened in 2000, it gave me an opportunity to, or I realized that if I used a little bit of my techniques that I had learned to improve the surface of the paper and pressing it flat without doing the other restorative techniques to it, then I could actually preserve the unrestored grade and get the grade higher. So once I realized that, then I thought, oh, there's something to this.
There's a business in that.
Yeah. And so the shift went from like restoring low grade books to actually doing very minimal unrestored work on high grade books. And so that's how it started in the early 2000s. Ironically, a lot of people just kind of went right over their heads. I tried to sell it as a service early on. Didn't really have anybody that was, it was still early on with CGC, which is understandable. And then, and then obviously.
Were they still in Parsippany at the time? Because I remember going over there when they first opened over there.
Yeah, first couple years, and I'd never even been in a facility until 2004. But I was friends with, Steve Morak and Mark Haspel and Chris Friesen. I knew all those guys.
The original guys that opened the original office of CGC.
So it was just a matter of me trying to reverse engineer their grading process during those early years and understand what they were assigning grades to certain defects, and then the ones that I could fix, how much that would raise the grade. So I turned into a business model where I could screen books and be able to tell into the future, looking at the book, what grade it could potentially be in the future. And that was the basis of the service that I started selling people. And then the next few years it obviously got bigger, word got out, and and then now
So how long do you think it took before it exploded?
It had to go through kind of a vetting process, so to speak.
Yeah.
Probably similar to coins, because they have something
I mean, I guess that in business terms, there's market penetration.
Right.
You had to get the confidence of the collectors out there that were going to get on board with them. Yeah. And now it's become, I mean, there's...
It's like everybody's doing it.
Everybody's doing it. I mean, there's sharks, there's floor sharks, there's weekend warriors, there's everybody that looking to buy a raw book, getting it pressed, getting the grade up, and actually making that money. And having a graded 9.0 when you bought it as an 8.0, it makes a huge difference. I mean, that's like probably 20% in a grade like that?
Sometimes, or way more. It was, initially there was, people were confused. They didn't understand how the book could go up in grade because the problem was the process is secret, very highly secret. So, you couldn't really, people had to first wrap their heads around what was going on in these books. And so once we got past the point of, of comfort, they understood that they were being professionally done. The books looked really good in hand afterwards. It took a few years, but I would say probably like 08, 09, 10 is when finally we got over that hump of acceptance.
So 5, 6, 7 years, before you really hit your growth curve.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it took a little while, and then so once that happened, then it became, now it's so it's synonymous with grading practically.
Yes.
It's like when you get something graded, you press and grade it. If it needs it. Which a lot of books.
Well, I do.
Yeah.
I'm a me as an art dealer, but as far as my mail order business, I'm doing comics, I'm doing graded, I'm doing I'm submitting my own stuff, I'm buying stuff that I feel like I can upgrade. I'm multifaceted in that respect, and it's good because I do a lot of business in comics. On this trip, I've done about 25% of my business has been in comics.
Okay.
Yeah. And as far as
and grading, and you're getting and you're selling graded.
Oh
copies,
yeah, I only really brought my graded stuff, and my CGC graded stuff, and I have deals worked out with Mr. H, you know, to supply him with some stuff, you know, on a VIP program basis, you know.
Right.
So we get along like that, and that's a big facet of my business, because I wanted to, you know, as a businessman, I wanted to diversify as much as I could in the hobby, especially as how hard art was getting to resupply myself or get good stuff, and you know, in that way, and you know, buying comic collections and skimming for the gradable stuff, and then taking that and sending it in, and having a backlog and a process by which, you know, maybe it takes 6 months sometimes for stuff to come back based on backlog. I got a pipeline.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, if you don't go to new movies, then the ones that are coming out on cable are new to you.
Right.
You know, so once you get that, you know, get them rolling like that, and you have 20 tickets out and stuff shows up every week, that's how I look at it for my customers.
Right, and you're like you know, I look at us as being the people who are, you know, transferring the raw comics over years into CGC holders, because, you know, the new generation of collectors are guys that, you know, and girls that want to build collections of slabbed books where they have very specific grades. They can, you know, build a collection based on grade, based on pedigree, whatever. And so, yeah, we're part of that process of, you know, pressing, restoring, unrestoring, grading, whatever, getting that book as nice as it can be, getting it into the holder and then out into the wild,
into the collector's market.
Yeah, and we're just part, because, you know,
and finding a home for it.
Yeah, because it's going to dry up eventually. You know,
what's going to dry up?
Like the best stuff, the best vintage books in the world will all end up in holders eventually.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so we're just part of that ongoing process before we get there.
Well, like when I found that Batman 1, you're like, oh wow, it's so cool to see one that I haven't seen before, the usual suspects, or this or that.
Yeah.
You know, like guys that, you know, that it had traded hands, and they were seeing if they could get you know, that half grade.
Fresh to the market.
Yeah, fresh to the market like that. Now, I think there's a really important point about this and the grading process. The most important point about that is that you know, when new collectors come in, it gives them an easier path to buy books with more confidence. And that's what I like. I mean, that's been a huge thing. Not just the dealers, you know, trying to upgrade stuff, you know, based on services rendered and stuff like that. But, you know, new collectors that, you know, say they saw the Black Panther movie and they want a Black Panther one, and they're like, oh, a 9.8, that's the best kind, right?
Yeah.
You know, it gives new collectors confidence and getting involved with the hobby.
Exactly, yeah. It's safer.
Because I'm all about that. I'm all about making customers.
Yes,
you know, I have an eBay store with 30,000 things on it. We send out 100 packages a day, you know, and we have 100% feedback.
Yeah.
And I have a guy, I mean, he spends half his day making sure that 100% feedback stays 100%, but you know.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, yeah, having, you know, the safety that CGC provides for the collectors coming in, especially, because I mean, this is all about getting people into our hobby. You know, the movies is a great path for people to take into the collectibles field, which is what we do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, having CGC in place like that gives it, you know, such a more safer place for them to be able to buy confidently. Because, well, you know, the last thing you want to have happen, which used to happen, is new people would come in and they would buy books, and then they would find out they got burned. You know, either they was overgraded or had restoration or whatever. You know, and now they can come in and confidently buy, and it keeps them in the hobby, and you know, keeps them collecting. And I think that's just the best thing about growing this.
Well,
industry.
I think you should really be proud of yourself, because you were instrumental in that whole process and that whole phenomenon taking place in the hobby.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
you really should.
I am. I'm very.
I mean,
proud
you've affected a lot of people's lives in a positive manner and helped them, you know, facilitate their collecting and getting their happy time back, and that's what it's supposed to be. You know, I'm about making customers and, you know, making sure they have a pleasant experience, and that, you know, their nostalgia bone and zone gets, you know, tickled. Yeah, nostalgia bone gets tickled. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
So, you know, I appreciate you, and I appreciate the efforts you've made in this hobby and your influence.
Well, Anthony,
thank you,
very
sir.
much. Yeah, appreciate it.
This is Matt Nelson, and we're at San Diego Comic-Con with the guy that helped proliferate pressing of comics and facilitating that in the whole hobby.